Take a guess. Am I holding my gun to pray?
Good evening, Doctor. I hope Sargon is treating you well. I want to reach out with a status report on Spuria since, as you know, I've been keeping an eye on her trips off the landship. This is building on the events of Rhodes' escapismo incident, so if you need a refresher, make sure to watch my report on that first. Now, this following report is based on a compilation of debriefing interviews after she's returned to the landship, combined with a few other sources. As usual, I'll go over the major events, pausing to discuss what stands out to me, and then at the end, I'd like to bring up some tangential but interesting tidbits and get your opinion on a few things. Now, I stand behind any interpretations I make, but I do hope to hear your thoughts as well. As always, I hope for these meetings of ours to be a dialogue, Doctor. Funerals are for the living. While the dead rest, we who remain have to learn to not only cope with their absence, but learn how to live on in spite of it. And there's some nuance to that, of course, but I think that old phrase holds true enough for Spuria and Fortuna's situation. But it still leaves the question, what should a funeral be? How can they leave behind their pain and regrets? Mourning might be a universal experience, Doctor, but how we choose to go about it remains a very personal journey. I bring this up because Serpilia opened up recently about a funeral she attended in Lateran. It happened very shortly before the incident at the Ambrosi Monastery. It was for a beloved old man, a demolitions expert and a former teacher of her in Lemoines. Given his age, no one was surprised, and the old man had lived a good life to the very end, enjoying demolition races in the nursing home up until his body finally gave out. He even made enough friends in that nursing home that those too infirm to make the trip requested that the service be live-streamed, which is why Serpilia made the trip. Could argue Lemoine's presence had something to do with it as well, but it's hard to say whether Spuria expected her there, to begin with. Despite the fact that Spuria pestered Lemuel, that's to say Exusii, for Lemuen's room number for a whole year after she was hospitalized, now that she had the time to talk, she was less happy and more just concerned that Lemueng was making this long trip to the outskirts of town. And perhaps she was also embarrassed by her feelings and didn't want to risk empathy, showing her weakness to the women she admires. At least, that's my interpretation of her caginess in this instance. In any case, when Lemoine takes the initiative to talk to her, Spuria is eager to be seen in a good light. But I think Lemoine herself recognizes that Spuria was in need of something other than Lemoine's approval to push her forward. After all, as valuable as role models are, the best version of ourselves is rarely a copy of another person. But, well, if you've heard my prior report, you already know that this all falls in line with my previous thoughts, and you know my rather glowing opinion of Serpilia and her future. So, let's take a quick aside. Have you ever seen a Laterano funeral, Doctor? There are calmer, more mournful parts of the ceremony too, but by the end, they're usually fairly loud affairs. You see, it's a cultural belief that when it comes to death, the sadness, the pain, the regret, and anger should all disappear in a storm of gunfire, explosions, and, well, laughter. Not that things aren't unique when it comes to treating funerals like festivals, a happy send-off, a joyous celebration of life. But I do find it interesting that it suits the Sancta's empathy fairly well. With sadness being able to radiate from person to person through their halos, what better way to break out of a potentially endless cycle of mourning than to gather everyone together for a moment of excitement and joy? Well, keep this Lateran funeral in the back of your mind as we move the clock ahead to after it and after the incident at the monastery. How has Spuria's journey gone since then? Well, she left her position at the Curia to instead be a sort of fields operative. Specifically, she's become the warding of the falling angel Fortuna. Watching over her in the small community of Sarkaz Tuna strives to make her home with. Part of that is to put Laterano at ease. The notion of a falling angel outside of their sphere of influence puts them on edge, after all. Not to mention the messy politics surrounding that group. But while that may seem cynical, when we look over her slim reports to the Pope and compare them to the mountings of work she's done patrolling the area around Tuna's group or anonymously directing caravans towards them, it's obvious what she believes her role as warding should be. She wants to use her skills to help them thrive, and of course that includes her skills as a gunsmith. Do you remember the antique gun Tuna carries? The one that led to her fall and the death of Delphina? It's been the source of a lot of speculation up till now. She still carries it, but of course the artifact has been tainted with memories of fear and regret. Despite that, she still wants to hold it. She still wants to be able to fire it. She still wants to be able to pray with it. And so Spuria took it upon herself to try and modify it so that even a non-Dokutah can wield it. First, she stopped off at a gunsmith shop, one that she used to skip classes and head off to when she was a student. Spuria calls the owner Magistra Amali, Magistra being a term for teacher. Given Amali's nature, we can assume that Spuria learns not only some gunsmithing from her, but also a thing or two about practical jokes. I'll let Spuria's long list of HR citations speak to the effectiveness of the latter, but I think Amali made a fine gunsmithing teacher too. Learning about gunsmithing outside of a classroom likely suited Spuria well. On her school record, she once stole an antique gun so she could disassemble it. In that case, her teachers called her a genius that never listened to a word in class and were just as eager to turn it into an educational moment as they were to reprimand her. Lateran. In any case, she chatted up Amelie and tried to subtly ask for help with her project of modifying a gun for use by a non-Dokutah. By happenstance, Amelie had a customer of her own that wanted help with a misfired weapon. Spuria flooded the customer with information about proper gun treatment and repairs, only to have the confused customer mention that the misfire was an accident caused by a 3-year-old girl accidentally getting her hands on the gun. And what she wanted wasn't a repaired weapon, but rather for the gun to be modified into something like a toy gun that shoots candy. Now, what's the lesson here? How does this help Spuria with her problem? Well, Amelie does spell it out when she suggests that Spuria ask her non-Dokutah client what exactly it is she wants. You might think that's a lesson that Spuria shouldn't need to be told at this point. After all, Lemmings consistently suggested that Spuria go out to meet the people her technology should help. As a student, she was encouraged to try and understand how the people who prayed with their guns before paradise existed truly felt. And then there's the business with the monastery. But I found the people are a stubborn breed, Dokutah. Surely you understand that changing the course of your life involves being shown that choice dozens of times before you take it once, and taking it dozens of times before it feels like a part of you. And even then, the temptation to backslide into old, comfortable ways of thinking is always there. It's a wonder we find the will to change at all. But Spuria does take the advice. When next she goes to check in on Fortuna, Raymond, and the Sarkas, she brings along the gun and asks Fortuna what she wants out of this. Fortuna tells her that she wants to overcome her fear. She tells her that she wants to hold it again. She tells her that she wants to find the joy and peace it gave her before and to share that joy the way the bishop did before he went on his pilgrimage. And I'd like to point out a subtle little thing. At the start of the conversation here, Spuria tells Tuna that she hasn't finished modding the gun yet. Then, Fortuna has a little trouble putting her thoughts into words, and a certain other thing happens we'll get to, and Spuria asks Fortuna again to explain as well as she can. Except this time, Spuria tells her that as long as they're clear with each other, they can understand each other even without socketing empathy. She mentions that for Tuna's sake, of course. The girl has been open about the feeling of blindness she felt since her fall. But I believe Spuria's statement really did come from the heart because she then says, "I haven't started modding your gun yet." I know, it sounds like a meaningless change of phrase, but humor me for a bit. Earlier, she told a lie. She told a small handful throughout this conversation, actually. All of them white lies, and those lies of technicality that she's so fond of, and she's trying to get out of an all-hands meeting. The sorts of lies that are true, but said in such a way that she knows it'll cause misunderstandings. I think the fact that Spuria corrects this tiny lie in her attempt to get at Fortuna's true feelings is incredibly meaningful because it's such a small thing to correct. Spuria, whose chosen codename is a joke about the false face she wears. Spuria, the Sancta who can lie through empathy. Spuria, who still keeps putting PTO slips on my desk, like I don't know where she's actually going at this point. That Spuria tried her best to be as honest as she could be, because she believed she needed to understand Tuna to be able to help her. So yes, it's still a small little change, but it stood out to me. And it seems that the answer she got from Fortuna was what she needed. She worked through the night and managed to finish the modifications before she collapsed over the table. Unfortunately, when she awoke, the gun was nowhere to be found. As for where it went, well, let's go over a detail I've been dancing around. When Spuria first arrived, she saw a little spat involving Fortuna, Raymond, and a Sarkaz named Parker. He fell behind on a journey towards Cosdale, only to be saved and taken in by Fortuna's insistence. Even the name Parker was her suggestion, though the otherwise nameless Sarkaz chafed at it. That interruption when Spuria and Fortuna spoke? It was Parker listening in, thinking that the two Sancta were preparing some devious plot for the Sarkaz, lured into this community. Spuria announced that she knew he was there and invited him in. The other little lies Spuria made? Well, one was the reason she'd been steering Fortuna away from discussing her fall, since she knew Parker was listening in but didn't want to announce it quite yet. Another is that, since the Curio wants to keep Fortuna's fall out of the public eye, letting these unknown Sarkaz into the community would be a violation that Spuria would neglect to report to the Pope, supposedly because it'd be too much of a bother, but I hope I've convinced you already that Spuria is a lot more soft-hearted than she lets on. This Sarkaz stole the modified gun from Spuria as she slept and ran off, desperate to catch up with the team that left him behind. You see, a Sancta's gun is a popular trophy among the Sarkaz, much like the Sarkaz's horns are occasionally taken as trophies by Sancta. Bringing one with him would prove his grit and get him back in with the path to Cosdale. Spuria and Fortuna caught up with him. They found him bleeding out after he'd barely escaped a wild beast attack. They argue, he raises the gun, maybe hoping a misfire will kill them all, but Spuria snatches it away. He cries out for it, his heart still desperately clinging to the idea that somehow he'd be able to find his way back to his old team and escape those supposedly deceitful and villainous Sancta, up until he passes out. Whether he simply falls unconscious or passed away at that moment is left a bit vague in the reports I've seen. Besides, I think it's best we wait until Spuria herself is comfortable enough to tell us. Until then, I personally believe he survived, but I would understand the perspective of those who think otherwise, especially after Spuria raises a gun and fires it into the air. She explains to Fortuna what I told you before, that this is how Lateran holds funerals. All the pain, regret, and grief fading away in gunfire. She fires again. It's not as lively as the Sancta funeral we talked about before. There's no cheering, no explosions to accompany it. But Fortuna steps forward and, with Spuria's encouragement, she takes her antique gun back, the one she prayed with in the monastery, the one that killed her best friend, the one that Spuria modified, and the one that Parker tried to steal. She fires it, the third shot in that 3-round salvo. Only, instead of a bullet, confetti and a loud pop burst out of the gun. Well, it's not technically a gun anymore. It's a toy that anyone could pull the trigger on. Something that Fortuna can hold. Something that shouldn't have been able to bring grief anymore. Something that can let her share her joy with others. Even if, in that moment, knowing that Cave could manage to smile. Still, solemn as that moment was, it was also a moment of growth. Growth that I deeply believe will bring joy in the future. Again, I see the arguments for Parker being dead here, for that funeral being his. But since I already said I disagree, you might wonder who I think that funeral is for. Personally, I think it was for Delphina, for the monastery as a whole, for the dream they had to leave behind there, just like Parker needed to accept his dream of Cosdale had left him behind. A funeral for all the pain and regret that Fortuna still held, for all the terror that made her afraid of praying with her gun, for everything that dragged her back as she tried her best to move forward. Whoever or whatever was in their thoughts, though, maybe it'd be most accurate to say that the funeral was for Spuria and Fortuna, who fired those shots. The funeral was, well, for the living. And that, Dokutah, brings us to the end of current events. What you take away from it is, of course, ultimately up to you, but to me, Spuria's growth as she tries her best to genuinely connect with others stands out most of all. She's come a long way from the woman who did everything she could to seal herself off from the world. A long way from the woman for whom technology was just an interesting problem to take apart. rather than something that could give people meaning and hope. I hope that you'll continue to look after her. I'll admit, I think you both could benefit from some practice being a little more direct with your feelings. I know it can be difficult. I know you have very valid reasons to put up defenses, just make sure you're building gates and not walls around your heart. Sorry, that's a bit mushy, isn't it? Well, from a cultural studies perspective, I think this report is also a great example of how Laterans view and handle death. In our lines of work, death is an unfortunately common companion. It might do you good to learn about the different cultures of Terra, and how they handle their grief so that you can give your operators the support they need, in the way that they need. Let me know and I can see about putting together a report for you. Speaking of, I am still working on my report on Minoa. Their fragmented history is at once a fascinating touchstone to talk about, and an infuriating reality to deal with when doing research. Conviction has been very eager to help fill in gaps, and I really do appreciate it, but I really would like to get a few secondary sources before I present anything to you. Now, I did have a list of tidbits I wanted to talk about. Bits and pieces about gun technology and personal histories that, while interesting, are a bit too tangential, even by my standards, as well as a few passages in my reports that I wasn't certain how to interpret and wanted your opinion on. But I think I'll save that for a different meeting. Time is a bit short, and I want to have time to hear your thoughts properly, Dokutah. Now, don't worry, I'm not trying to brush my work off or anything. If you like to hear me talk and still subscribe to the importance of these meetings, I'll be sure to keep making time for you. So I'll just ask this for now. What do you think about Spuria? How do you think she should best use her talents as a technician, as a gunsmith, as one of Rhodes Island's operators? And given what we spoke about, what do you think it means for a Sancta to raise their gun to pray? If you need some time to think about it, please feel free, and in any case, thank you for giving me your attention, Dokutah. I hope to see you again soon.
You look like you're in a bad mood, so I grabbed you a snack from... Hey, what's that surprised look for? Yes, you're no Sancta, and I can't feel your emotion, but that doesn't mean I can't care about you. All right, eat up now. I want to see if this is from the tainted batch.